The photo. Marlo Ashford had learned to make herself invisible. She walked the corridors of Lincoln High School with her shoulders curved inward, her eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum tiles, her dark hair falling forward like a curtain between herself and the world. She had perfected the art of occupying the smallest possible space, of moving through crowds like smoke, of never drawing attention. It was a survival mechanism she had developed over the past 2 months, ever since she had transferred to Lincoln in January after her mother's job relocation brought their family from Portland to this sprawling suburb outside Seattle. The morning bell echoed through the main hallway, that particular metallic clang that always made her flinch. Students surged around her, a river of bodies flowing toward first period, and Marlo kept her head down, her backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. She had learned which routes to take, which stairwells to avoid, which bathrooms were safest. She had mapped the school's geography around the territories claimed by Tessa Carrington and her friends. Tessa. Even thinking the name made Marlo's stomach tighten. Tessa was everything Marlo wasn't. Tall where Marlo was small, confident where Marlo was anxious, surrounded by admirers where Marlo ate lunch alone. Tessa had platinum blonde hair that she wore in an artfully messy ponytail, perfect makeup that never smudged, and a way of looking at people that made them feel either chosen or worthless. Marlo had been categorized as worthless within her first week at Lincoln. It had started small. A comment about Marlo's thrift store jacket, laughter when Marlo stumbled in the hallway, her name mispronounced deliberately in a mocking tone. Then it escalated. Books knocked from her arms, the contents of her backpack dumped out, whispers that followed her like shadows. Tessa's 2 closest friends, Kendall Morrison and Sloane Vega, were always there, amplifying every cruel moment with their laughter and their phone cameras. Marlo made it to her first period English class without incident, sliding into her usual seat in the back corner. She pulled out her worn copy of The Great Gatsby and tried to lose herself in Fitzgerald's prose, but the words blurred on the page. She was tired, so deeply, exhaustingly tired. The kind of tired that came from constant vigilance, from sleeping poorly because she dreaded the next day, from the emotional labor of pretending everything was fine whenever her mother asked how school was going. She hadn't told her mother. She definitely hadn't told Cormac. Her older brother would lose his mind if he knew what was happening. Cormac, who had practically raised her after their father died when Marlo was 10. Cormac, who had put his own life on hold to help their mother keep the family together. Cormac, who had built a successful career as an MMA coach and fighter, who had trained some of the best fighters in the Pacific Northwest, who had a reputation for being fiercely protective and absolutely uncompromising when it came to his little sister's well-being. She couldn't tell Cormac. He was finally thriving, finally getting recognition for his coaching, finally dating someone who made him happy. He had done enough for her. She needed to handle this herself. She was 17, not 7. She should be able to deal with some mean people without running to her brother. The day crawled forward with agonizing slowness. By lunchtime, Marlo's nerves were frayed. The cafeteria was always the worst. She grabbed a tray with a sad-looking sandwich and an apple, paid quickly, and headed toward her usual table in the far corner, partially hidden behind a pillar. She had just sat down when she felt the shift in the atmosphere, that particular electric charge that meant trouble. Tessa appeared, flanked by Kendall and Sloane. All 3 were dressed in variations of the same aesthetic: expensive athleisure wear, pristine white sneakers, carefully curated casualness that probably cost more than Marlo's entire wardrobe. Tessa's blue eyes fixed on Marlo with predatory focus. "Oh, look," Tessa said, her voice carrying across nearby tables. "It's Marley." Or is it Marlo? I can never remember. She knew Marlo's name perfectly well. The mispronunciation was intentional, designed to erase her identity. "Marlo," she said quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. What was that? Tessa leaned in, hand cupped behind her ear in exaggerated mockery. Speak up, new girl. We can't hear you when you mumble. Marlowe felt her face burn. Several nearby tables had gone quiet, students turning to watch with a mixture of pity and voyeuristic interest. No one ever intervened. They never did. Leave me alone, Marlowe said, slightly louder this time. Kendall laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. Oh my God, she talks. I was starting to think she was mute. Just really boring, Sloane added, examining her manicured nails with exaggerated disinterest. Seriously, does she own any clothes that weren't made in like 1995? Tessa picked up Marlowe's sandwich, peered at it with theatrical disgust, then dropped it back on the tray with a splat. Even her food is depressing. This is what happens when you have no personality, I guess. Everything about you is just grey. The word landed like a physical blow. Grey, invisible, forgettable. All the things Marlowe had been trying to be, now weaponized against her. I heard she doesn't even have any friends from her old school, Kendall said, scrolling through her phone. Like, zero social media presence. Who doesn't have Instagram? Is she Amish or something? She probably got run out of her old school, Sloane suggested. Like, everyone hated her so much she had to transfer. It wasn't true. Marlowe had left Portland with tears and promises to stay in touch with friends who had slowly stopped responding to her texts once she was gone. Distance killed friendships faster than she had expected, but she couldn't defend herself without sounding pathetic, couldn't explain without giving them more ammunition. Tessa leaned against Marlowe's table, blocking her escape route. You know what your problem is, Marlowe? She said the name with exaggerated care, like she was doing Marlowe a favor by getting it right. You're just so fucking sad all the time. It's exhausting. You bring everyone down with your tragic orphan energy. Something cracked inside Marlowe's chest. I'm not an orphan, she said, her voice shaking. My dad died, but I have a family. Oh, did I hit a nerve? Tessa's smile was vicious. What, daddy issues make you sensitive? That explains so much. Marlowe stood abruptly, grabbing her backpack. She needed to get out, needed air, needed to be anywhere but here. She moved to leave, but Sloane stepped into her path. Where are you going? Sloane asked. Tessa was just trying to help you. Give you some advice about fitting in. You're so ungrateful. Move, Marlowe said. Make me. They stood there in a frozen tableau, the entire cafeteria watching now. Marlowe could feel hundreds of eyes on her, phone cameras probably recording, waiting to see what would happen. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She would not cry. She absolutely would not give them the satisfaction. Just move, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Sloane exchanged a glance with Tessa, then stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. Marlowe walked toward the cafeteria exit, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Behind her, she heard Tessa's voice, loud and clear. God, she's so weird. We were literally just talking to her, and she runs away crying. So dramatic. Laughter followed her into the hallway. Marlowe made it to the nearest bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and let the tears come. They burned hot tracks down her cheeks as she pressed her fists against her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to figure out how to survive the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the year. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and opened her messages. Her last text from Cormac was from this morning. A photo of his gym with a caption about early morning training session. She started typing half a dozen times, wanting to tell him everything, then deleted each attempt. What would she even say? That she was weak, that she couldn't handle high school, that she needed her big brother to fight her battles? Number. She had to handle this herself. The following weeks established a brutal rhythm. Marlowe would arrive at school early, hoping to avoid the main hallway when it was crowded. She would navigate from class to class using the longer, less populated routes. She would eat lunch in the library when she could, or in her car when the librarian was enforcing the no-food policy. She became an expert at predicting where Tessa and her friends would be and choosing alternate paths, but there was no real escape. Lincoln High School wasn't big enough to truly avoid anyone, and Tessa seemed to have a sixth sense for finding her. Every few days brought a new incident. Her locker was vandalized with cruel messages written in permanent marker. Someone spread a rumor that she had lice, making people physically recoil from her. Her backpack disappeared from the gym locker room and turned up in the boys' bathroom trash can. The teachers saw. She knew they did. Mrs. Patterson had witnessed Tessa shoulder-check her in the hallway, hard enough to knock her into the lockers. But when Marlowe had caught the teacher's eye, Mrs. Patterson had just looked away and kept walking. Mr. Chen had definitely heard the mocking comments during group work in chemistry, but he'd simply reminded everyone to stay on task without addressing the specific behavior. The school counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, had called Marlowe in once to ask if everything was okay at home. But when Marlowe said she was fine, Ms. Rodriguez had accepted the lie without pushing. The system was designed to protect the school's reputation, not its students. Tessa's father was Marcus Carrington, a prominent lawyer who donated generously to Lincoln's athletics programs. Kendall's mother was on the school board. Sloane's family owned a local real estate empire. These were students with parents who had lawyers on speed dial and no hesitation about using them. It was easier for the school to ignore the problem than to confront it. By mid-March, Marlowe had lost 8 pounds she couldn't afford to lose from her already slight frame. She wasn't sleeping well, often lying awake until 2 or 3 in the morning, her mind replaying the day's humiliations and dreading tomorrow's inevitabilities. Her grades were slipping. She found herself unable to concentrate during lectures, her thoughts spiraling into dark loops of anxiety and despair. She started having panic attacks. The first one hit during 4th period history, a sudden overwhelming sensation of not being able to breathe, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, sweat breaking out across her skin despite the air-conditioned classroom. She'd managed to excuse herself and sit in the nurse's office until the feeling passed, but after that, they came more frequently. The triggers were unpredictable, a certain laugh, a phone camera pointing her direction, even just the anticipation of having to walk into the cafeteria. Her mother noticed something was wrong, but couldn't seem to pin down what. "You're adjusting to the new school," she would say optimistically, as if Marlowe's increasing withdrawal was normal teenage moodiness and not a response to systematic psychological warfare. "Give it time, sweetie. You'll make friends. You just need to put yourself out there more, put herself out there," as if the problem was Marlowe's failure to be social enough, not that she was being actively targeted by people who seemed to derive genuine pleasure from her suffering. Cormac was harder to avoid. He FaceTimed her regularly, usually late at night after training sessions, and he had always been able to read her better than anyone. Their conversations followed a predictable pattern. He would ask how school was. She would say fine. He would study her face through the screen with those sharp grey eyes that missed nothing, and she would change the subject to his coaching or his girlfriend Nina or anything else that would redirect his attention. "You look tired, Marley girl," he'd said during their last call, using his childhood nickname for her. Cormac was 10 years older, had been 18 when she was 8, more like a young uncle than a brother in some ways. After their father's death, he had stepped fully into a parental role, helping their mother navigate grief and bills and raising a daughter. He had taught Marlowe to ride a bike, helped with homework, scared off her first boyfriend when the kid had been disrespectful, attended every school event their mother couldn't make because she was working double shifts. "Finals are coming up," Marlowe had lied. "Lots of studying." You eating enough? You look skinny. I'm fine, Cor. Stop worrying. That's literally impossible, he'd said with a half-smile. Worrying about you is in my job description. Then his expression had turned more serious. You know you can tell me anything, right? If something's going on, if someone's giving you trouble. I know, she'd interrupted quickly. Everything's fine, I promise. She'd hated lying to him, hated it with every fiber of her being. But what was the alternative? Cormac showing up at Lincoln and doing what? He couldn't fight high school students. He couldn't solve this problem with his fists or his intimidating presence. This wasn't some straightforward threat he could neutralize. This was social warfare, psychological torture, death by 1,000 cuts. There was no clear enemy to face down, no moment of decisive confrontation, just endless, grinding cruelty that left no visible marks. So she said nothing, and she tried to survive, and she told herself that somehow, eventually, it would get better. April arrived with unseasonable warmth, the Pacific Northwest finally shaking off winter's grey shroud. The improvement in weather did nothing to improve Marlowe's situation. If anything, it got worse. The parking lot became another battlefield, students gathering outside between classes and during lunch, creating more opportunities for public humiliation. Tessa seemed energized by the sunshine, her cruelty taking on new creative dimensions. Then Beckham Kim transferred to Lincoln, and everything shifted. He appeared in Marlowe's AP literature class on a Monday morning in mid-April, introduced by Mrs. Patterson as a transfer student from California. Beckham was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and an easy confidence that suggested someone who was comfortable in his own skin. He took the only open seat, which happened to be next to Marlowe in the back corner, and when their eyes met, he smiled. An actual, genuine smile that reached his dark brown eyes. "Hey," he said quietly as Mrs. Patterson started her lecture on symbolism in The Great Gatsby. "I'm Beck." "Marlowe," she whispered back, then quickly faced forward, certain this would be the end of their interaction. New students quickly learned the social hierarchy at Lincoln. They learned who was safe to befriend and who wasn't. Marlowe had been firmly categorized in the not column, but Beckham apparently hadn't received the memo. After class, he caught up with her in the hallway. "So, is Patterson always that intense about color symbolism, or was that a special show for the new kid?" Marlowe glanced around nervously, expecting to see Tessa or one of her friends watching, ready to target this new student for the crime of talking to her. "She's thorough," Marlowe said. "That's diplomatic." His grin was infectious. "Listen, I'm completely lost. They do things differently in California, and I have no idea where anything is here. Can you point me toward the cafeteria? I was told I need to get my lunch card programmed or something." She should say no, should make an excuse, point him in the right direction and escape. But there was something in his open, friendly expression that made her want to believe human decency still existed. "I can show you," she heard herself say. "I'm heading that way anyway." They walked together through the hallways, Beckham asking questions about teachers and classes, Marlowe answering in brief sentences, still waiting for the trap to spring. But he seemed genuinely interested in her answers, laughing when she made a dry comment about the permanently broken heating system, asking follow-up questions that suggested he was actually listening. "So what's the social scene like here?" he asked as they approached the cafeteria. "Any unwritten rules I should know about? Territories I shouldn't cross? Forbidden bathroom stalls?" Despite herself, Marlowe almost smiled. "Lincoln's like any school. There are groups, cliques, social hierarchies. Let me guess," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Jocks at the top, artists and weirdos at the bottom, everyone else fighting for the middle?" "Something like that." "And where do you fall in this elaborate caste system?" The question was asked lightly, but it landed with weight. Marlowe stopped walking, suddenly aware of how this looked. Here she was, probably the most socially toxic person at Lincoln, contaminating this new student with her presence. He seemed nice. He deserved better than to be dragged down into her problems before he'd even finished his first day. "Look," she said, "you should probably know that I'm not exactly popular here. If you want to avoid social suicide, you might want to find someone else to hang out with." Beckham studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than shocked or dismissive. "That's a pretty specific warning. Sounds like there's a story there." "There's always a story." Her voice came out more bitter than she'd intended. "But trust me, you don't want to be part of it." "Maybe I'll decide that for myself," he said quietly. Then, before she could respond, he nodded toward the cafeteria entrance. "Come on. Show me where to get this lunch card thing sorted out. And then maybe you can tell me where the library is, because I'm definitely going to need a quiet place to catch up on reading." That afternoon, Marlowe found herself in the library's back corner during lunch, picking at a sandwich while trying to read the assigned chapters for English. She had expected to be alone. The library was her sanctuary during lunch periods. But Beckham appeared with his own lunch and a genuine question about the Gatsby essay they had due next week. They talked about literature, about symbolism and themes, and whether Fitzgerald's portrayal of the American dream was still relevant. Beckham had opinions, thoughtful ones, and he listened to hers with actual attention. It was the first real conversation Marlowe had had with someone her own age since transferring to Lincoln. It felt like finding water after crossing a desert. Over the next week, a cautious friendship formed. Beckham sought her out between classes, sat next to her in English, ate lunch with her in the library. He told her about California, about his father's job transfer that had brought their family north, about his love of photography and classic films. Marlowe found herself relaxing slightly, the constant tension in her shoulders easing incrementally. Maybe, she thought hesitantly, things might actually get better. She should have known the universe wouldn't be that kind. It was a Tuesday morning when Tessa finally noticed Beckham. Marlowe was at her locker, switching books between classes, when Tessa appeared with Kendall and Sloane in her usual formation. But this time, Tessa's attention wasn't on Marlowe. "You're the new kid," Tessa said to Beckham, who had been walking toward Marlowe. Her tone was different than the one she used with Marlowe, warmer, interested, predatory, in a completely different way. "Beck, right?" "Beckham," he corrected politely. "I'm Tessa." She extended her hand like she was granting him a privilege. "Welcome to Lincoln. Have you been getting the tour? Meeting people?" Beckham glanced at Marlowe, then back at Tessa. "Yeah, Marlowe's been showing me around. She's been really helpful." Something flickered in Tessa's eyes. Not quite anger, but calculation. She looked at Marlowe, as if seeing her from a new angle, reassessing. "Oh, you've been hanging out with her." The pause before her was deliberate, loaded with implications. "Yeah," Beckham said, his tone cooling slightly. "Why?" Kendall laughed, that familiar sharp sound. "Oh, honey, no one told you? That's sweet. Look, we're just trying to help you out here. Marlowe's well, she has some issues. People have tried to be nice to her, but she's just really difficult." "Difficult how?" Beckham asked. "Just awkward," Sloane said with false sympathy. "Like clingy and weird. No one wants to say it to her face. But since you're new, we thought you should know. We don't want you to get stuck with someone who's going to drag you down socially." Marlowe felt her face burning. She wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. This was worse than the usual torment, because Beckham was witnessing it, hearing these lies, and soon he would realize that associating with her was social poison, and he would distance himself like everyone else had. But Beckham's expression hardened. "That's interesting," he said coolly, "because Marlowe's been nothing but helpful and normal since I got here. Meanwhile, you three are standing here talking shit about someone right in front of her. so I'm not sure your definition of difficult matches mine." Tessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "We're just trying to be helpful. But okay, make your own mistakes. Don't say we didn't warn you." She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at Marlowe. "Wow, Marlowe. Getting defensive. Having your new friend fight your battles. That's pretty pathetic, even for you." After they left, Beckham turned to Marlowe. "What the hell was that about?" Marlowe closed her locker with shaking hands. I told you that being seen with me was social suicide. You should have listened." "Those girls are assholes," Beckham said flatly, "and I'm not going to let them decide who I'm friends with." "You don't understand how this works," Marlowe said, her voice tight. "They're not going to just leave you alone now. You defended me. That makes you a target too." "Then I guess we'll be targets together," he said with a shrug that was probably meant to be reassuring, but just made Marlowe feel worse. She wanted to protect him, wanted to push him away before Tessa's cruelty could extend to him. But she was also so desperately lonely, so starved for human connection, that she couldn't quite force the words out. So she said nothing, and they walked to class together, and Marlowe tried to ignore the sick feeling in her stomach that told her she'd just made everything so much worse. She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, Tessa's campaign expanded to include Beckham. It started subtly, deliberate exclusions from conversations, dismissive looks, whispered comments just loud enough to be heard. Then it escalated. Beckham's car was keyed in the parking lot. Someone started a rumor that he'd been expelled from his California school for dealing drugs. His locker was broken into, and his photography equipment was stolen, but Beckham, frustratingly and admirably, refused to be intimidated. When Kendall made a loud comment in the cafeteria about him being Marlowe's charity case boyfriend, he'd simply raised his voice and asked her to repeat it, since she obviously wanted everyone to hear. When Sloane tried to trip him in the hallway, he'd sidestepped smoothly and said, "Nice try," loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. He met cruelty with calm confrontation, refusing to be either bullied or drawn into actual conflict. Marlowe was simultaneously grateful for his friendship and terrified by it. For the first time since transferring to Lincoln, she had someone in her corner. But she was also watching someone else suffer because of her, watching Tessa's cruelty extend to encompass another victim, and the guilt was crushing. "You should stop hanging out with me," she told Beckham one afternoon in late April as they sat in the library. "This is only going to get worse." "Probably," he agreed, not looking up from his chemistry homework, "but I'm not going to let some insecure mean girls dictate my life. Besides, who else is going to discuss the problematic nature of 1920s literature with me?" Despite everything, Marlowe smiled. It was small and fragile, but it was genuine. "You could probably find someone who doesn't come with a target on their back." "Yeah, but they'd be boring." He looked up then, his expression serious. "Look, I know you've been dealing with this for a while. And I know you think you have to handle it alone. But you don't. Everyone needs backup sometimes. There's no shame in that. My brother would say the same thing," Marlowe said, before she could stop herself. "Your brother sounds smart. You talk to him about what's going on here?" "No." The word came out firm. "And I'm not going to. He has his own life. I'm not dragging him into my problems." Beckham looked like he wanted to argue, but let it drop. They worked on homework in companionable silence for the rest of the hour, and when the final bell rang, they walked toward the parking lot together. They were halfway across the lot when Tessa's voice rang out behind them. "Hey, lovebirds!" "Wait up!" Marlowe's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with Tessa calling attention to them in public. She turned slowly to see Tessa, Kendall, and Sloane approaching, along with a handful of other students Marlowe recognized from the popular crowd. Several were holding their phones up, obviously recording. "We've been thinking," Tessa said, her voice carrying in the spring air. Other students were stopping to watch, drawn by the promise of drama. You two are always together. The sad, lonely girl and her white knight. It's really sweet, almost romantic. Leave us alone, Tessa, Beckham said tiredly. Oh, I'm not here to cause trouble, Tessa said with exaggerated innocence. I'm just curious. Are you two actually dating? Because everyone's wondering. I mean, Beckham, you're cute. You could do so much better. So what's the appeal? She looked Marlowe up and down with obvious disdain. Is it a pity thing? A charity project? We're friends, Marlowe said quietly, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Not that it's any of your business. Friends, Tessa repeated, tasting the word like it was foreign. Right, because that's believable. Marlowe doesn't have friends. She's a total loner. No one actually likes her. She turned to address the growing crowd. Seriously, has anyone here ever had an actual conversation with Marlowe? Anyone? Silence. Phones continued recording. Marlowe felt like she was dying from the inside out, each second of that silence another nail in her social coffin. See, Tessa said triumphantly, even when given the chance, no one wants to defend her. That should tell you something, Beck. She's got nothing to offer, no personality, no interests, no life. She's like a black hole of sad energy. Beckham's jaw tightened. You know what I think? I think you're deeply insecure. I think you need to tear other people down to feel good about yourself. And I think someday you're going to look back on how you treated people in high school and be ashamed of yourself. For a brief moment, something that might have been hurt flashed across Tessa's face. Then it hardened into pure malice. Oh, you poor, stupid boy. You actually think you're going to be some kind of hero here, that standing up for the tragic loser is going to work out well for you. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward them. On the screen was a photo of Marlowe from the previous week, taken in the cafeteria. She'd been eating lunch alone, and somehow the photo had captured her at her absolute worst. Hunched over, hair messy, an expression of pure misery on her face. Someone had added a caption. When you have no friends and everyone hates you, but you still show up to school. This has been going around, Tessa said. Pretty popular, actually. Over 1,000 shares just in our school alone. Some people from other schools have picked it up too. You're kind of famous now, Marlowe. Famous for being pathetic. Marlowe felt like she couldn't breathe. 1,000 shares. The entire school had seen this, probably more than just Lincoln. Her humiliation was digital now, permanent, spreadable. Her hands started shaking. But that's not even the best one, Kendall said, pulling out her own phone. She showed another photo, this one taken in the gym locker room when Marlowe had been changing. The photo was angled to make her look as unflattering as possible, catching her mid-motion with her eyes half closed and mouth open, shirt pulled halfway off. The caption read, "Proof that some people should never reproduce." "Delete that," Beckham said, his voice low and dangerous. "Right now." "Or what?" Sloane challenged. "You going to fight us? Hit a girl?" "I'm going to report you," he said. "That's harassment. That's probably illegal, taking photos in the locker room." Tessa laughed. "Report us to who?" "The school. They don't care. They've been watching this happen for months and haven't done shit. My dad's a lawyer, Kendall's mom is on the school board, and Sloane's family basically funds half the sports programs here. Who do you think they're going to side with? Maybe we should post some photos of you, Beck," Kendall suggested, her tone falsely sweet. "Since you want to be part of Marlowe's sad little world so badly, we could make you famous too." "You know what?" Tessa said, as if struck by sudden inspiration. "Let's make this easier. We'll delete the photos, all of them, every post, every share we can control." She paused dramatically. If Marlowe admits that she has no friends, that she's pathetic, that she's a loser who should have stayed in whatever sad town she came from, say it loud enough for everyone to hear, and we'll stop. The parking lot had gone silent except for the sound of traffic from the nearby street. Every eye was on Marlowe, waiting to see what she would do. Phone cameras captured every angle. This moment would be shared, discussed, dissected. There was no escape. "Marlowe, don't," Beckham said urgently. "Don't give them what they want." But Marlowe was so tired, so endlessly, bone-deep tired of fighting, of surviving, of pretending to be strong. Maybe if she just gave them this, they would be satisfied. Maybe if she admitted defeat, they would finally leave her alone. She started, her voice barely audible. "Louder," Tessa demanded. "We can't hear you." Marlowe's vision blurred with tears. Her throat felt like it was closing. She couldn't do this. She couldn't say those words, couldn't give them that power, couldn't let them win so completely. But she also couldn't keep fighting. There was nothing left to fight with. "I have to go," she managed, then turned and walked toward her car with as much dignity as she could manage, which wasn't much. Behind her, laughter erupted, along with Tessa's voice. "Run away! That's what you're good at." Marlowe made it to her car, fumbled with her keys, got the door open. She sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and let the tears come, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Through her blurred vision, she saw Beckham approaching, but she started the engine and pulled out before he could reach her. She couldn't face him, couldn't face anyone. She drove home on autopilot, barely seeing the road through her tears. When she pulled into the driveway of their small rental house, she sat in the car for another 10 minutes, trying to compose herself. Her mother's car wasn't there, still at work, which was a small mercy. Marlowe didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. Inside, she went straight to her room, closed the door, and collapsed onto her bed. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Against her better judgment, she looked. The photos Tessa had shown her were everywhere. Instagram, Snapchat, group chats she'd been added to without permission just so people could mock her directly. The comments were worse than the photos. "OMG, so cringe. This is sad. Why does she even come to school? I would literally die if I looked like that." She should delete the apps, should throw her phone across the room, but she couldn't stop scrolling, couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop torturing herself with the confirmation that yes, everyone at Lincoln High School thought she was worthless. Her phone rang. Cormac. She stared at his name on the screen, torn between desperate need and absolute determination not to drag him into this. The call went to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. "Hey Marley girl, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. Love you." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She wanted to call him so badly, wanted to tell him everything, let him help, let him fix this the way he'd fixed so many things when she was younger. But this wasn't a skinned knee or a failed test or a mean teacher. This was systematic destruction of her social life, her reputation, her sense of self. What could Cormac even do? She set her phone aside and pulled a pillow over her head, trying to block out the world. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under into fitful sleep, plagued by dreams of endless hallways and mocking laughter. When Marlowe woke, it was dark outside. She checked her phone, 9:47 p.m. Her mother had texted asking if she wanted dinner, but Marlowe had slept through it. There were dozens more notifications from social media, which she ignored. She felt hollow, scooped out, like all her emotions had burned themselves out, leaving only ash. She went downstairs. Her mother was in the kitchen, cleaning up from dinner. "Hey, sweetie," she said, turning with a smile that faded when she saw Marlowe's face. "Are you okay? You look upset." "I'm fine," Marlowe said automatically. "Just tired. Lots of homework." Her mother studied her for a moment, concern evident in her expression. "You've been saying that a lot lately." "Fine. But, honey, you don't seem fine. You've lost weight. You're always in your room. You look exhausted all the time. Is something going on at school? This was the moment. Marlowe could tell her, could admit that she was drowning, that every day was a battle she was losing, that she needed help. But looking at her mother, who worked long hours as a nurse to support them, who was already stressed about bills and the new city and keeping their family afloat, Marlowe couldn't add to her burden. "I'm just adjusting," she said, echoing what her mother had told her months ago. "It takes time, right? New school, new city, I'll be okay." "Well, if you need to talk to someone, maybe a counselor at school," her mother suggested gently. "There's no shame in getting support." "I know, Mom. I'm okay, really." The lies came easier each time. "I think I'll just make a sandwich and then get back to homework." Her mother looked unconvinced but didn't push. Marlowe made a sandwich she didn't want, took it back to her room, and stared at it for an hour without eating. Eventually, she threw it away and tried to focus on homework, but the words on the page might as well have been hieroglyphics. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from Beckham. "Hey, just wanted to check if you're okay." Today was brutal. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Call me if you want to talk." She appreciated the gesture but couldn't bring herself to respond. What would she even say? That she was fine. She wasn't. That she had a plan to fix things. She didn't. That everything would be better tomorrow? They both knew that was a lie. Marlowe turned off her phone and tried to sleep. She dozed fitfully, waking every hour or so, her mind churning with anxiety about having to return to school, face everyone who had seen those photos, endure whatever new torment Tessa had planned. She was still awake when her alarm went off at 6 a.m. The thought of getting up, getting dressed, driving to Lincoln and walking through those doors made her physically ill. She couldn't do it. She just couldn't. Marlowe called in sick to the school attendance line, then texted her mother that she wasn't feeling well. Her mother, already at the hospital for an early shift, responded with concern and instructions to stay home and rest. For the first time in months, Marlowe allowed herself to simply exist without the weight of survival. She stayed in bed, door closed, curtains drawn, and let the hours pass in a grey haze. By noon, her phone, which she'd turned back on to text her mother, was exploding with messages. Most were from Beckham, increasingly worried. A few were from unknown numbers, probably people from school who had gotten her contact info somehow, sending her links to more posts about her. She ignored all of it. Then, at 1:30 p.m., a text came through that made her heart stop. "Marlowe, this is serious. I saw what they posted about you. We need to talk. Call me as soon as possible. Core number." No. He knew. Somehow Cormac had found out, had seen the photos, had seen her humiliation broadcast across social media. This was her worst nightmare. She'd worked so hard to keep him separate from this disaster, and now he knew everything. Her phone immediately rang. Cormac. She stared at it, paralyzed. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail, rang again. She couldn't avoid him forever. "Hello." Her voice came out small and broken. "Marley." His voice was tight with controlled anger, the tone he used when he was furious but trying not to show it. "I need you to be straight with me right now. How long has this been going on?" "Cor, I can explain." "How long?" He wasn't yelling, but there was an edge to his voice that was somehow worse than yelling. "How long have these people been bullying you? How long have they been posting pictures of you online, humiliating you, making your life hell?" Tears were already streaming down her face. "Since January. Since I transferred." Silence on the other end, then, "Since January. It's almost May, Marlowe. That's 4 months. 4 months and you didn't tell me." "I wanted to handle it myself," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I didn't want you to worry. You've already done so much for me, and I thought I could just—" I thought if I ignored them, they'd get bored and stop, but they didn't, and it kept getting worse, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you." "Stop," he interrupted, his voice gentling slightly. "Stop apologizing. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But Marley, you should have told me. You should have told someone. You don't have to go through this alone." "What can you even do?" she asked miserably. "They're right." "No one cares. The school doesn't do anything. Their parents have money and connections, and I'm just nobody. I'm nobody, and everyone knows it now." "Listen to me very carefully," Cormac said, and now his voice had shifted to something harder, something that reminded Marlowe that her brother had once been a professional fighter, had competed at levels where backing down simply wasn't an option. "You are not nobody. You are my sister. You are smart and kind and strong, and these people have been systematically destroying you because they're cruel and they can get away with it. But that ends now. Cor, you can't just show up and threaten high school students. That's not how this works." "I'm not going to threaten anyone," he said, "but I am going to make sure this stops. I'm going to talk to the school administration. I'm going to make sure they understand that they've been failing in their duty to protect their students, and if they won't handle it, I'll escalate to the district, to the school board, to wherever I need to go." "They won't listen," Marlowe said hopelessly. "Tessa's dad is a lawyer. He'll destroy you. Let him try." There was zero doubt in Cormac's voice. "Marley, I've spent the last 10 years teaching people how to stand up for themselves, how to be strong, how to face opponents who seem unbeatable. You think some small-town lawyer scares me? These kids have been torturing you in a place where you should be safe. That's not acceptable. That's never acceptable. I don't want you to ruin your life trying to fix mine," she whispered. "You're my sister. Your life is my life. That's how this works." His voice softened again. "I'm coming up there tomorrow." "What?" "Cor, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. I'm going to talk to the school, and I'm going to make sure you're okay. And then we're going to figure out how to make this better." He paused. "Is Mom there?" "She's at work." "Okay. I'm going to call her after we hang up. She needs to know what's been going on too." "Please don't," Marlowe said desperately. "She has enough to worry about. And her daughter being bullied to the point of having photos of her posted all over social media isn't something she'd want to know about." His tone was gentle but firm. "Marley, I love you, but you've been trying to handle this alone, and it's clearly not working. Let the people who love you help you. That's not weakness. That's just how family works." They talked for another 20 minutes. Cormac asked careful questions about specific incidents, about the photos, about how the school had responded or not responded. Marlowe found herself telling him everything: the daily humiliations, the fear, the isolation, the way teachers looked away, the constant anxiety that had become her new normal. With each detail, she could hear her brother's anger growing, carefully controlled, but unmistakable. "Okay," he finally said. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm driving up first thing tomorrow morning. I'll be there by noon. I'm going directly to the school to meet with the principal. Then I'm taking you out for lunch, and we're going to talk about what comes next. Do not go to school tomorrow. Just stay home, rest, and wait for me. Understood?" "Understood," she said, feeling simultaneously relieved and anxious. Having Cormac involved felt like passing a massive weight to someone stronger, but she was also terrified of what might happen when her brother's intensity collided with Lincoln High School's carefully maintained image. After they hung up, Marlowe lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She should feel better. She'd finally told someone, finally let someone help. But all she could think about was what would happen when word got out that her brother had shown up. Tessa would have a field day with it. Can't even fight her own battles, has to get her big brother to do it. The mocking practically wrote itself. But maybe it didn't matter anymore. Maybe she was past the point of caring what Tessa thought. Maybe hitting rock bottom meant there was nowhere to go but up. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey loser, heard your big brother is coming to save you." That's so sad. Does he still dress you too? Marlo turned off her phone and pulled her blankets up to her chin. Tomorrow would either be better or it would be worse, but at least something would change. At least she wouldn't be facing it alone anymore. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in the dark, thinking about Cormac, about what he might say or do, about whether anything would actually change, or if this would just make her a bigger target. By dawn, she was exhausted and wired simultaneously, her nerves stretched thin as wire. Her mother had come home late the previous night, and they'd had a long, painful conversation. Her mum had cried, apologized for not noticing sooner, promised to do better. Marlo had reassured her that it wasn't her fault, that she'd been deliberately hiding it. Now her mother was taking a personal day off work to be there when Cormac arrived, which somehow made everything feel more real and more serious. At 11:45 a.m., Marlo heard a vehicle pull into the driveway. She looked out her window to see Cormac's black truck, and seconds later, her brother was getting out. He looked the same as always, tall and solid, wearing jeans and a fitted grey t-shirt that showed the build of someone who trained daily, his dark hair cut short, his face showing the same determined expression she'd seen 100 times when he was preparing for a fight. She met him at the door. He took one look at her, pale, exhausted, smaller somehow than she should be, and pulled her into a fierce hug. "It's going to be okay," he said against her hair. "I promise you, Marley girl. This is going to be okay." She let herself believe him, just for a moment. Cormac spent 20 minutes talking with their mother, getting more details, asking questions in that methodical way he had when he was gathering information for strategy. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and looked at Marlo. "I'm going to the school now. Do you want to come with me, or would you rather stay here?" "I'll come," she decided. Hiding at home hadn't helped anything. If this was going to blow up in her face, she might as well face it head-on. The drive to Lincoln High School took 15 minutes. Cormac was quiet, his hands steady on the wheel, his jaw set in that way that meant he was thinking several moves ahead. Marlo found herself studying him, this person who had shaped so much of her life. He taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never back down from a challenge, but he'd also been there for every fear, every doubt, every moment when strength alone wasn't enough. He'd taught her that asking for help wasn't weakness. She'd just forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way. They pulled into the school parking lot at 12:30 p.m. Students were out for lunch period, clustered in groups across the grounds. Marlo saw heads turn as Cormac's truck rolled past, saw the recognition on some faces. Her brother wasn't famous exactly, but in regional MMA circles, he was known. His gym had produced several fighters who'd gone on to larger promotions. He'd been interviewed in local sports media, and he looked exactly like what he was, someone you absolutely did not want to mess with. They walked toward the main entrance together. Marlo kept her eyes down, feeling the weight of stares, hearing whispers start to spread. Is that her brother? Oh my God, he's huge. Why is he here? Inside, they went directly to the administration office. The secretary looked up with practiced professional smile that faltered slightly when she saw Cormac's expression. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with Principal Brennan," Cormac said. His tone was polite, but left no room for negotiation. "It's regarding the harassment and cyberbullying of my sister, Marlo Ashford. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm happy to wait until he's available. However, given that this concerns ongoing harassment that your school has apparently been ignoring for months, I suspect he'll want to make time." The secretary's professional demeanor shifted to defensive. "I'll see if he's available. Please have a seat." They sat in the hard plastic chairs of the waiting area. Through the office windows, Marlowe could see students passing in the hallway, many of them staring. She recognized some of them, people who had watched her be humiliated, who had probably shared those photos, who had done nothing. Now they were gawking at the spectacle of her brother showing up like this was entertainment. 10 minutes later, Principal Brennan emerged from his office. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with thinning hair and the harried expression of someone perpetually overwhelmed. "Mr. Ashford? Please come in. Marlowe, you're welcome as well." Brennan's office was exactly what Marlowe expected. Institutional furniture, motivational posters, framed diplomas, a cluttered desk. They sat across from him while he settled into his chair with visible discomfort. "I understand there's been some concern about bullying," Brennan began, his tone suggesting this was a minor issue that could be quickly resolved. "Not some concern," Cormac corrected. "A documented pattern of harassment, intimidation, and cyberbullying targeting my sister that has been ongoing since January, which means your staff has either been complicit through inaction or incompetent in their supervision. I'm trying to determine which." Brennan's face flushed. "Mr. Ashford, I assure you, we take bullying very seriously here at Lincoln. However, teenage social dynamics can be complex." "Let me simplify them for you," Cormac interrupted, pulling out his phone. "These are photos that were taken of my sister without her consent, including at least one taken in a locker room, which I believe violates both school policy and potentially state law regarding privacy and harassment. These photos were posted across multiple social media platforms, with captions designed to humiliate and degrade her. They've been shared thousands of times among your student body and beyond. The ringleader of this harassment campaign is a student named Tessa Carrington, assisted by Kendall Morrison and Sloane Vega." He showed his phone to Brennan, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as he scrolled through screenshots Cormac had apparently compiled. "This has been happening in your hallways, your cafeteria, your parking lot. Multiple students have witnessed it. Based on my conversation with Marlowe, several teachers have directly observed incidents and done nothing. So I need to understand, what exactly is your school's policy on bullying, and why hasn't it been enforced?" "These situations are often complicated," Brennan said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Without direct evidence of physical altercation, bullying doesn't require physical violence," Cormac said, his voice hardening. "Psychological harassment is still harassment. Creating a hostile environment is still a violation. And taking photos of someone in a locker room without consent is a crime in this state, Principal Brennan. Multiple crimes, in fact." "I understand you're upset on your sister's behalf," Brennan said carefully, "but we need to be cautious about making accusations. These students you've mentioned, their families are well established in our community. We would need substantial evidence before taking action that could have serious repercussions." "Substantial evidence?" Cormac's laugh was sharp and humorless. "I just showed you screenshots of the harassment. It's documented, it's public. What more evidence do you need? Or is the real issue that you're afraid of lawsuits from the families of the bullies?" Brennan's silence was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," Cormac said, leaning forward slightly. "You are going to investigate this immediately and thoroughly. You are going to interview witnesses. You are going to review any security footage from the areas where incidents occurred. You are going to take action against the students involved, including notifying their parents and implementing appropriate consequences. And you are going to ensure that my sister can attend this school without fear of further harassment. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate your concern, but I don't respond well to ultimatums. The school has procedures. And I have lawyers," Cormac said flatly. "And I have local media contacts who would be very interested in a story about a school ignoring systematic bullying because the perpetrators have influential parents. And I have a platform through my business that reaches thousands of people in this community. So you can either handle this internally and appropriately, or I can make it a very public problem for Lincoln High School. Your choice." The principal's face had gone from flushed to pale. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise of consequences if you continue to fail in your duty to protect students. There's a difference." Cormac stood. "I'll give you 48 hours to start taking visible action. If nothing has changed by then, I'm escalating to the district and filing formal complaints. Am I clear?" Brennan stood as well, trying to reclaim some authority through body language. "I will look into the situation." "You'll do more than look into it. You'll fix it." Cormac turned to Marlowe. "Come on, Marley. We're done here." They walked out of the office, through the halls that were still populated with students at lunch. Marlowe could feel every eye on them, could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. By the end of lunch period, everyone would know that Marlowe's brother had come to school and confronted the principal. By the end of the day, Tessa would know. There would be consequences. But as they pushed through the main doors into the spring sunshine, Cormac put his arm around her shoulders and said, "That's step one. Now let's go get lunch and talk about what comes next." They drove to a local diner, one of those classic American places with red vinyl booths and laminated menus featuring everything from pancakes to burgers. They ordered. Cormac insisted Marlowe actually eat something substantial, and then they talked. "I know you're worried about backlash," Cormac said, "and there probably will be some. Bullies don't like being confronted. But Marley, what they've been doing to you is not sustainable. You can't keep living like that. It's destroying you." "I look weak now," Marlowe said quietly, "having my brother come fight my battles." "Is that what you think happened in there? That I fought your battles?" Cormac shook his head. "Marley, you've been fighting a battle alone for 4 months. You've survived systematic psychological warfare. That takes immense strength. But every fighter needs a corner. Every fighter needs backup. That's not weakness. That's strategy." "Tessa's going to make this worse," Marlowe predicted. "Let me tell you something about bullies," Cormac said, his eyes serious. "They thrive on power imbalances. They target people who seem isolated, who seem weak, who seem unable to fight back. You know what changes that dynamic? When they realize their target isn't alone. When they realize there will be consequences, when they realize that their actions have been documented and exposed and that adults are finally paying attention. You think Brennan will actually do anything? I think Brennan is motivated by protecting the school's reputation and avoiding lawsuits. My showing up and making it clear that I'm willing to escalate publicly gave him a strong incentive to act. Will he do enough? Maybe not immediately. But we've started applying pressure, and we'll keep applying it until something breaks." Their food arrived. Cormac made sure Marlowe actually ate, keeping the conversation light while she worked through her burger. She found she was hungrier than she'd realized, having barely eaten for days. When they'd finished, Cormac ordered pie. Apple for him, chocolate cream for her, and they sat in the comfortable silence of siblings who had been through enough together that words weren't always necessary. "What happens tomorrow?" Marlowe finally asked. "Tomorrow you go to school," Cormac said, "and I go back home, but I'm a phone call away. Any time, day or night, if something happens, you tell me. No more hiding things to protect me. Deal?" "Deal," she agreed. "And we're going to look into getting you some training," he continued, "not because you're going to fight anyone, but because having physical confidence changes how you carry yourself. You already know some basics from when you were younger, but we'll refresh that and build on it. People can sense when someone is genuinely unafraid, and it changes how they interact with you. You think that'll help?" "I think being able to handle yourself physically gives you a different kind of mental strength. You stop seeing yourself as a victim because you know you're not helpless. That shows in your body language, your voice, everything. and Bullies notice it. They finished their pie and drove back to Marlowe's house. Cormac spent another hour there, talking with their mother, making plans, ensuring Marlowe had specific action items for if things escalated again. Before he left, he pulled Marlowe into another hug. "You're going to be okay," he said firmly. "This isn't over yet, but you're not alone in it anymore. Remember that." She watched him drive away, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The situation wasn't fixed, not by a long shot, but the crushing weight of isolation had lifted slightly. She wasn't carrying this alone anymore. That night, Marlowe forced herself to check social media. The posts about her were still there, but they'd been joined by new content, speculation about why her brother had shown up, debates about whether she was a snitch for getting adults involved, arguments about whether the bullying was as bad as people were claiming. Public opinion seemed divided. Some students were defending her, saying the bullying had gone too far. Others were doubling down, saying she was being overdramatic. Beckham had texted multiple times. "Holy shit, your brother is a legend. Heard he absolutely destroyed Brennan." "How are you doing?" She responded. "I'm okay. Thanks for checking." He called immediately. "You sure you're okay?" "Today was intense." "My brother's intense," Marlowe said. "But yeah, I'm okay. Better than I've been in a while, actually." "Is he really an MMA coach?" Beckham asked. "People are saying he's trained professional fighters, that he used to compete at a high level, all this stuff. Yeah, it's mostly true. He runs a gym back home. He's really good at what he does." She paused. "I should have told him sooner." Probably," Beckham agreed, "but I get why you didn't. It's hard asking for help. Feels like admitting you can't handle things." He said something similar, that needing backup isn't weakness. It's strategy. "Your brother sounds smart." They talked for another half hour, Beckham filling her in on the school atmosphere. Apparently everyone was talking about Cormac's appearance. Speculation was rampant, and Tessa and her friends had been notably quiet all afternoon. When they finally hung up, Marlowe felt steadier than she had in months. The next morning, driving to Lincoln High School felt different. She was still anxious. There would definitely be fallout from yesterday. But she wasn't terrified. She parked, grabbed her backpack and walked toward the main entrance with her head up instead of down. The morning was surreal. Students stared, whispered, pointed, but there was something different in their expressions. Not all of them were mocking. Some looked curious. A few even looked respectful. When Marlowe passed a group of underclassmen in the hallway, one of them said quietly, "Hey," not in mockery, but in genuine greeting. Marlowe nodded back, the interaction so small it would have been meaningless to anyone else, but felt monumental to her. She made it to first period, without incident. Mrs. Patterson smiled at her, a genuine smile, and said, "Good to see you, Marlowe." The teacher's awareness felt loaded with meaning. Clearly word of yesterday's office confrontation had spread among the staff. Beckham was already in his seat when Marlowe arrived. He grinned at her. "You survived. I'm impressed." "Day's not over yet," she pointed out. "True, but you're here. That counts for something." The morning passed in relative peace. Marlowe kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Tessa to appear with some new torment, but it didn't happen. She saw Tessa and her friends at a distance a few times, but they didn't approach, didn't even seem to look in her direction. It wasn't until lunch that things came to a head. Marlowe and Beckham were sitting in the cafeteria, not hiding in the library for once, when Tessa finally made her move. She approached their table with Kendall and Sloane, but her usual confident swagger was slightly muted. "Can we talk?" Tessa asked, directing the question at Marlowe. Her tone wasn't hostile, which was somehow more unsettling than if she'd come in with her usual aggression. Marlowe exchanged a glance with Beckham, who looked ready to intervene, then looked back at Tessa. "About what?" "In private?" Tessa's eyes flicked to Beckham dismissively. "Anything you need to say to her, you can say in front of me," Beckham said flatly. Tessa's jaw tightened with irritation, but she nodded. "Fine. Look, I wanted to clarify some things. The photos, the posts, that was just joking around. We didn't mean for it to become this huge thing. Everyone's making it out like we were, seriously bullying you or whatever, but it was just normal high school stuff, you know?" Marlowe stared at her in disbelief. "Normal?" "Well, yeah. I mean, people make fun of each other. It happens. You were new, kind of weird, and we gave you a hard time. But having your brother come in and threaten the school, that was way over the line. You made us look like criminals or something. The audacity of it was breathtaking." Tessa was actually trying to reframe months of systematic harassment as friendly teasing that Marlowe had overreacted to. "You posted photos of me taken in the locker room without my consent," Marlowe said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You called me pathetic in front of the entire school. You targeted my only friend to hurt me. That's not teasing, Tessa. That's bullying." "Everyone's so sensitive these days," Kendall muttered. "You know what?" Marlowe said, and she could feel something shifting inside her, some fundamental change in how she saw this situation. "I'm done caring what you think. I'm done letting you make me feel small. You've been cruel because you can be, because it made you feel powerful. But that ends now." "Oh, please," Sloane scoffed. "You're only brave because your brother scared everyone. Without him here to protect you, you're still just a lonely loser." "Maybe," Marlowe acknowledged. "But I'm a lonely loser who's not afraid of you anymore. And that's what really bothers you, isn't it? That you don't have power over me anymore." Tessa's face flushed with anger. "You think this is over? You think one visit from your brother changes anything? He can't be here every day, Marlowe. Eventually people will forget, and things will go back to normal." "Except they won't," Beckham interjected, "because now everyone knows. Now the administration is watching. Now there's documentation and witnesses and people who aren't going to stay silent anymore. You don't have the protection you thought you had." "My father will have something to say about this," Tessa snapped. "You can't just accuse people of bullying without proof. That's defamation." "There's literally thousands of screenshots of proof," Beckham pointed out. "But sure, have your dad call his lawyers. I'm sure that'll make you look innocent." Tessa looked between them, clearly frustrated that this wasn't going how she'd expected. "Whatever. We were trying to be mature and talk this out. But if you want to be dramatic about it, fine. Just know that this isn't over, not even close." She turned and walked away, Kendall and Sloane following. Marlowe watched them go, and she realized something important. She didn't feel intimidated. Tessa's threats, which would have left her shaking with anxiety a week ago, now just felt empty. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone knew it. "That went well," Beckham said dryly. "She's going to try something," Marlowe predicted. "Probably. But you've got people watching your back now, including me." The afternoon brought more curious stares and whispered conversations, but no direct confrontations. Word had spread quickly about the lunchtime encounter, and Marlowe could sense the shift in the school's social atmosphere. Students who had previously ignored her now nodded in the hallways. A girl in her history class asked if she wanted to work together on the upcoming project. Small gestures, but they added up to something significant. Visibility without vulnerability. After school, as Marlowe was walking to her car, she was stopped by a younger student, a slight boy with glasses who looked nervous. "Hey, Marlowe, I just wanted to say, what you did today, standing up to Tessa like that was really cool. She's been awful to me too, and seeing you not back down made me feel like maybe I don't have to either." Marlowe felt something warm unfold in her chest. "What's your name?" "Oliver. I'm a sophomore." Listen, Oliver, if Tessa or anyone else gives you trouble, don't wait to tell someone. Don't try to handle it alone like I did. Talk to a teacher you trust or your parents or whoever. Don't let it build up. He nodded seriously. Thanks. And thanks for, showing us it's possible to fight back. As Oliver walked away, Marlo felt a shift in how she understood her own situation. She wasn't just surviving her own bullying anymore, she was potentially part of changing the culture for others. That responsibility felt heavy, but also purposeful. Over the next week, the fallout from Cormac's intervention continued to unfold. Principal Brennan called Marlo, her mother, and eventually Tessa, Kendall, and Sloane with their parents into separate meetings. The school's investigation had apparently been swift once they realized the legal and publicity risks involved. Multiple students had come forward as witnesses once they felt safe doing so. The evidence was overwhelming. Tessa and her friends were suspended for 2 weeks. When they returned, they would be on strict behavioral contracts with consequences clearly outlined for any further harassment. The photos were reported to the social media platforms and began being taken down. The school implemented a mandatory assembly on cyberbullying and harassment, featuring testimonials from students who had experienced it. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The photos had already spread too far to be completely erased from the internet. Some students still sided with Tessa, arguing the punishment was too harsh, and there were lingering tensions, uncomfortable silences when certain people encountered each other in hallways. But it was better, substantially better. Marlo could walk through school without the constant knot of anxiety in her stomach. She could eat lunch in the cafeteria without being targeted. She could participate in class without fear of mockery. Small freedoms that she'd taken for granted before January had been returned to her. 2 weeks after Cormac's visit, Marlo got a text from an unknown number. "This is Tessa. Can we talk? In person?" Marlo stared at the message for several minutes, considering. She texted Cormac first. "Tessa wants to meet with me." "Should I?" His response came quickly. "Your call. But maybe meet somewhere public and let someone know where you'll be. Stay safe." She responded to Tessa. "Library. Tomorrow after school. 4 p.m. The next day, Marlo arrived early and claimed a table in the main reading area where everything would be visible. Beckham had wanted to come with her, but she'd asked him to give her space for this conversation. He'd agreed reluctantly, but was waiting in the parking lot just in case. Tessa showed up exactly at 4. She looked different, less polished, less confident. The suspension had apparently done something to her carefully maintained image. She sat down across from Marlo, without the usual territorial swagger. "Thanks for meeting me," Tessa said quietly. Marlo waited, not making this easy for her. "I wanted to apologize," Tessa continued, the words clearly difficult for her. "What I did, what we did to you, was wrong. I knew it was wrong while I was doing it, but I kept doing it anyway because—" She trailed off, struggling. "Because why?" Marlo prompted. "Because it felt good to have that kind of power. Because I was dealing with my own shit, and taking it out on someone who couldn't fight back felt easier than dealing with my actual problems. Because I'm not a good person, apparently." "Why me, though?" Marlo asked. "Why target me specifically?" Tessa was quiet for a long moment. "You were new, quiet, easy target. And honestly, you reminded me of how I used to be before I figured out how to fit in here. Shy, anxious, trying to disappear. I hated that part of myself, and taking it out on you felt like, I don't know, destroying evidence." The honesty was unexpected and somewhat disarming. Marlo studied Tessa's face, looking for signs of manipulation, but found only exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. "My dad lost his shit," Tessa added. "When the school called him in, showed him the evidence, explained the potential legal consequences. He threatened to sue everyone involved, but his lawyer apparently told him we didn't have a case, that if anything, we were vulnerable to lawsuits ourselves. He was more angry about the legal exposure than about what I'd actually done to you, which tells you what kind of person he is. What happens now? Marlowe asked. I finish out the year here if I'm lucky. If there are any more incidents, any more complaints, I get expelled. My dad's already looking at boarding schools for next year. Somewhere he can control the narrative better. Tessa laughed bitterly. Kendall's parents are making her transfer too. Sloane's family hired a PR consultant to manage the situation. It's all very dramatic. You're not asking me to feel sorry for you, are you? No, Tessa said quickly. You don't owe me sympathy or forgiveness or anything. I'm just trying to explain that there are consequences, and I'm facing them. And I genuinely am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I took something that was already hard for you and made it so much worse. You didn't deserve any of it. Marlowe considered this. You know what the worst part was? Not the photos or the insults or any specific incident. It was feeling like I was completely alone, like no one cared enough to intervene, to say something, to just acknowledge that what was happening was wrong. That isolation was worse than anything else you could have done. I know, Tessa said softly. I made sure of that. Made sure people were afraid to be associated with you. That was deliberate, and I'm sorry for that especially. They sat in silence for a moment. Marlowe felt something loosening in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the release of some of the rage and hurt she'd been carrying. I don't think we're going to be friends, she said finally. I don't expect that, Tessa agreed. I just wanted you to know that I acknowledge what I did was fucked up, and I'm trying to figure out how to be less of a terrible person. That's a work in progress. Well, good luck with that, Marlowe said, not entirely unkindly. Tessa stood to leave, then paused. Your brother is terrifying, by the way. Like in person, he's somehow even scarier than the stories about him. I thought my dad was intimidating, but your brother has this thing where he doesn't even need to raise his voice to make you feel like you've been dismantled. Despite everything, Marlowe smiled slightly. Yeah, that's Cormac. He has that effect on people. After Tessa left, Marlowe sat in the library for another 20 minutes, processing the conversation. She texted Beckham that she was okay and would meet him in the parking lot. She texted Cormac, Tessa just apologized to me. I think she actually meant it. His response, good, that's growth, but keep your guard up. People can change, but it takes time to prove it. As Marlowe walked out of the library toward the parking lot where Beckham was waiting, she thought about how different this moment felt compared to 2 weeks ago. She wasn't magically healed. Trauma didn't work that way. She still had moments of anxiety, still flinched sometimes when students approached her unexpectedly, still had nightmares about being photographed and mocked. But she also had something she hadn't had before, the knowledge that she didn't have to face things alone, that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom, that having people in your corner didn't make you helpless, it made you strong in a different way. The final weeks of the school year passed with a strange mix of normalcy and adjustment. Marlowe found herself gradually building friendships beyond just Beckham. Oliver, the sophomore who had thanked her that day, started joining them for lunch occasionally. A girl from her art class named Haven started talking to her about their shared interest in photography. Small connections that built slowly into something resembling a social circle. Tessa kept her distance, but was true to her word about changing her behavior. When Marlowe saw her in the hallways, Tessa would nod in acknowledgement, but didn't try to force further conversation. Kendall had transferred to a private school across town. Sloane remained at Lincoln but was notably subdued, her former cruelty replaced by careful neutrality. The school's culture was shifting slowly. The assembly on bullying had opened conversations that continued in classrooms and lunch tables. Teachers seemed more alert to problematic dynamics. Students who had previously been silent bystanders were more willing to speak up when they witnessed harassment. It wasn't a transformation. High school social hierarchies were too entrenched for that. But it was progress. Cormac visited twice more before the school year ended, once to attend a follow-up meeting with the administration, and once just to take Marlo out for dinner and check on her progress. During that dinner, he told her stories about his own school experiences, about being bullied himself when he was younger, about how he'd learned to channel that pain into motivation rather than letting it destroy him. The thing about surviving bullying, he'd said over burgers and fries, is that it can go one of two ways. Either it breaks something fundamental in you, makes you believe you deserve mistreatment, or it forges you into someone who refuses to accept that kind of treatment ever again. The key is making sure you land on the right side of that divide. How do you do that? Marlo asked. By not letting it define you. By recognizing that what happened to you says everything about the people who did it and nothing about your worth. By finding people who see your value and holding on to them. He'd reached across the table to squeeze her hand. And by fighting back, not necessarily with violence, but by refusing to disappear, refusing to be silenced, refusing to accept that cruelty is inevitable. Those words stayed with Marlo as the school year wound down. She wasn't the same person she'd been in January. That girl who tried to make herself invisible, who absorbed every insult as truth, who believed she deserved to be isolated. That version of herself felt like ancient history, someone she could barely recognize. The girl walking through Lincoln High School in late May was different. She still carried anxiety and trauma that would take time to process fully. But she also carried something else, a bone-deep understanding that she had survived, that she had people who loved and supported her, and that surviving meant she was stronger than she'd known. On the last day of classes, Beckham and Marlo sat on the hood of his car in the parking lot after the final bell, watching students stream out of the building with the particular energy that comes with freedom from academic obligations. "So," Beckham said, "you survived your first year at Lincoln High School. How do you feel?" Marlo considered the question seriously. "Different than I expected to feel back in January. Better, harder, more complicated." "You planning to come back next year?" She'd been thinking about that question for weeks. Part of her wanted to transfer, start fresh somewhere new, where no one knew about the bullying or the photos or any of it. But another part of her recognized that running away wouldn't solve anything. It would just relocate the problems. "Yeah," she decided. "I'm coming back. I'm not going to let them chase me away." "Good," Beckham said, "because I'd miss having someone to argue about literature with." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marlo pulled out her phone and took a photo. Not of herself, but of the view, the school building in the background with the sunset beyond it. She sent it to Cormac with the caption, "Made it through." His response came quickly. "Never doubted you would. Proud of you, Marley girl." The summer stretched ahead, with its promises of recovery and rest. Marlo had plans to spend time at Cormac's gym, to actually go through with the self-defense training they'd discussed. Not because she expected to fight anyone, but because he was right that physical confidence changed psychological confidence. She had plans to work on her photography, to spend time with her mother, to video chat with Beckham, who would be visiting family in California for a month. But more than any specific plans, she had something more valuable, the understanding that the worst had happened and she had survived it. That knowledge created a foundation of resilience that couldn't be easily shaken. Whatever came next, new challenges, new difficulties, new moments of doubt, she would face them with the certainty that she was capable of getting through hard things. As Marlowe drove home that evening, she thought about Oliver and Haven and the other students who had been watching her navigate this situation. She thought about how her survival and fight back had given them permission to believe they could do the same. She thought about how refusing to be invisible had made space for others to be visible too. That night, lying in bed with her window open to let in the spring air, Marlowe reflected on everything that had changed since January. The journey from victim to survivor to someone who could help others survive. It wasn't linear, wasn't complete, wasn't simple. But it was real. The scars remained, but they were healing. The fear remained, but it was manageable. The pain remained, but it was transforming into something that might eventually become wisdom. Her phone buzzed. A text from Beckham. "Thanks for being brave enough to be my friend, even when it was hard." She replied, "Thanks for being brave enough to be mine." Before sleep finally claimed her, Marlowe allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not naive optimism that everything would be perfect, but grounded hope that things could continue to get better, that she could continue to get stronger, that the next chapter, whatever it brought, would be written by someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't accept less than she deserved. The story didn't end there. Stories about healing and growth never truly end, they just evolve into new chapters. But that night marked a turning point, a moment when Marlowe Ashford stopped being defined by what had been done to her and started being defined by how she had chosen to respond. Not with violence or revenge, but with the quiet strength of someone who refuses to be broken, who asks for help when needed, and who survives with her humanity intact. In the darkness of her room, with the sounds of suburban evening filtering through her window, Marlowe finally felt like she could breathe fully. The weight that had been crushing her chest for months had lifted enough for her to imagine a future that didn't revolve around survival. She could imagine a future where she thrived, where she laughed without reservation, where she walked through the world without fear. That future wasn't guaranteed. There would still be hard days, still be moments when the anxiety crept back, still be times when she doubted herself, but now she had tools to handle those moments. She had people to call. She had the knowledge that she had already survived the worst and come out the other side. And perhaps most importantly, she had the understanding that strength came in many forms. It wasn't just about being able to fight, it was about being able to endure, to ask for help, to keep showing up, even when showing up was terrifying, to refuse to let cruelty make you cruel in return. As sleep finally pulled her under, Marlowe's last conscious thought was simple and profound. She had survived, and if she could survive that, she could survive anything. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but she would meet them as someone who knew her own resilience, who had people standing with her, and who had learned that the strongest thing you could do was refuse to face darkness alone. The moon rose over the neighborhood, casting silver light through her window. Somewhere in the house, her mother was watching television. Somewhere across the state, Cormac was probably finishing up late training at his gym. Somewhere across town, Beckham was probably editing photos. All these people, connected by choice and care, forming a network of support that had quite literally saved her. Marlowe Ashford fell asleep that night not as a victim or even as a survivor, but as someone who had learned one of life's most essential lessons, that we are stronger together than we ever could be alone, and that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, but the first step toward healing. In the morning, she would wake up and face whatever came next. But tonight, she rested in the knowledge that she had made it through, that she was not alone, and that the worst was behind her. The story of her bullying was over. The story of her strength was just beginning.